What's up, everybody? Welcome to Overcoming Average once again. Rick Stewart and Rob Condon here. So I want to go back and think about this year with 2020. It's been obviously a crazy year. A lot of stuff's happened, but it's also been for me personally, in the past couple of months, life's been crazy. It's been a year of reflection and looking back at what we've done and how we've changed and what's gotten better, what's gotten worse, rough things that we've gone through. So it's a good time for me to reflect on my purpose, hopefully with this podcast. And this one in particular, this little series that we've kind of done has been, for me, a way to hopefully encourage other folks and help them to become the best person that they have the chance to be in life. And that means a lot of different things for different people. For me, it's no big deal to Rick, but I just did a half marathon last weekend. And so that was a big accomplishment for me. But when I kind of evaluated my goals, I thought, okay, I really need to work on some sort of a physical challenge or a goal. And other people, it might just be marriage or friendships or finances or you name it, or maybe all of the above, right? Like maybe we need to sort of reflect on all of the above. But again, I wanted to encourage anybody who's listening to subscribe and share this stuff, because I hope that the more people that listen, the better. And if you get something out of it, please comment and subscribe and let us know what you think, whether you agree or disagree, because this particular week, we're on chapters 9 and 10 of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. And the two rules are, rule number 9, assume that the person you're listening to might know something that you don't. And rule 10, be precise in your speech. Both of which have to do with communicating with other folks. And the point of the conversation is not just meaningless jabber and talk, but it's a pressing and a pushing and a conversation, which should be something that changes us, that makes us think, that's a good point. Maybe I should change my perspective. So let's go ahead and talk about chapter 9. So assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't. I think the immediate, I guess, topic for 2020 is political coronavirus conversation. Like, it's hard to know, like, this person politically or ideologically doesn't agree with me. And I think Jordan Peterson lays it out really well, where he says there's different styles of conversation. Maybe style is the wrong word, but some people are just kind of waiting for their time to interject, or they're thinking of a way to make themselves look better, or to make themselves look wealthier or whatever. And one of those sort of styles, if you will, or whatever the word is, was that they're trying to prove their point the whole time. They're always thinking about, okay, how can I position my argument so that I can win this person over to my ideology? And that sort of goes both ways. And for those who haven't read the book, he gives an example, which is a horrible example, of the woman who came into his office as a psychiatrist and said, I think I've been raped five times. And I love how he handled that, because he doesn't say, yes, you were, or no, what are you doing going out to the bars? Like, what do you expect? He let her kind of talk it out, because life is complicated. A situation like that and a phrase like that is so complicated to break down.
You don't know whether you were raped or not. Like, you were just 5 times.
Yeah. But again, from the ideological standpoint, he even says, some people are going to say, you know what, you're a victim of rape culture and toxic masculinity, and you're a victim. And if she's told that, she might go through life believing that. But then other people might say, what did you expect? You're going out to a bar, you're drinking with these guys. Like, what did you expect is going to happen? You're scum. You need to change your life. And that's a different ideological which is also correct. And I think that's the dichotomy there, is that we need to be willing to listen maybe to the other argument, not so much that we change our mind, but we can try to see that the argument from another perspective and at least understand maybe that is a part of what happened. Because for me, that situation just proves that just one simple person's personal situation, it just shows that every situation is so complex. So, yeah, what do you guys think? What did you take away from that?
I think the hard thing about today now is that we're not encouraged to have those conversations. We're not, if we're afraid we're going to be canceled, or lose our job if we say something out of line, then we can't really talk. So I think we are starting to separate our lives. We're supposed to, have the politically correct thoughts here, and then in secret and talking with our friends, we could be more open. But so like when they say we need to have a conversation on race, really there's only one way that conversation could go. We can't, you can't say like, well, this, single motherhood has been bad, and, the welfare programs has caused more generational poverty, and it encourages you not to go back to work or limits how much income you can have. So conversations like that, we really shy away from that. We can't say that stuff, but it could only be the system is oppressing black people and stuff like that. We like that's acceptable conversation. So I think we just can't talk anymore. I think it's the biggest problem.
Yeah, so I find that the world is becoming very polarized. You no longer have kind of this big group in the middle that takes the time to see both sides of things. At least you're not seeing that in media. So now you have tweets and you have Facebook posts, and they're not conversational. So we can't have a dialogue in a broader sense to actually work through these things. Because as Rick was saying, you get canceled if you take the wrong stance. So it's no longer, everything right now is white privilege. That's what I'm seeing all over the place, right? So I read something today where they're not going to give vaccines, or someone's proposing not giving vaccines to the elderly because the elderly are predominantly white, and that's white privilege. So, is that really what people think and believe, though? So we're not really sitting down and having a conversation saying, no, that seems a bit ludicrous. Let's protect the people who need it, regardless of their race, because they're human beings.
Yeah.
And we're sort of losing all of that because you get a snapshot in time with a tweet, right? And that tweet is forever. And people can pick that tweet and use that to change people's perspective, or they can even change your words to make it seem like you're saying something you're not.
Yeah. Well, and I think, again, going back to the purpose and my desire with some of these long form podcasts is even selfishly that I can talk these things out. And I've actually found it relatively difficult to get people of a different mind to want to sit down and have a conversation. Birds of a feather flock together. I like this guy because we agree. I like to listen to other people's opinions if I don't agree with them, because you're right. Like, you can't really understand things in a tweet format in any sort of depth, like the situation in the book. Like, I think I've been raped 5 times. How do you tweet that? The answer to that? Like, well, here's the answer to that problem. So I think that politically, you just jump on whatever is the most socially acceptable thing. And I think it has shifted. I think that it used to be morals and values, and you were sort of the outcast if you were promoting other things. But now it's like you can be anything you want to be. You can be any gender. You can be any type of animal. Like, you can You can be a different race. There's people that identify. It's just like, wait a second. We've talked about that before, and it's like, clearly people are struggling. Those are complicated situations, family upbringing, and going back to the rule, assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't. I've been really trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody else. I don't know what it's like to be black, Hispanic, older than I am. And so like, it is hard to say, well, I think black people should feel this way if we don't understand. That being said, that's not necessarily the end all. Like, that's a logical fallacy to say, it's an argument from authority to say, you can only say something about a topic if you're a master's degree in that. You can't speak on history unless you have a master's degree in history. You're a doctorate of history. You can't speak on the coronavirus unless you're a doctor. You can't. And there is something to be said about that. Like, you're going to have some validity and weight, but yeah, these are complicated issues and we need to talk them out. But I think we need to be willing to understand, maybe not that someone's perspective is right, but to understand that I see how you might think that that is what's happening here.
I think the issue is, as a conservative, I think people who are more liberal are good people. They care about the poor. They want equality. I think they're misguided. I think it's naive. I think socialism has always failed, and there's always been racism. And the United States has been the least, in the last 30 years, the United States has been the least racist country in the history of, in the history of the world. So we definitely have bad apples, but as a society, I think for the most part we're actually good. So I believe there is racism. I believe liberals are good people, just naive. But I think a lot of liberals think conservatives are evil. They hate gay people. They want poor people to die in the gutter. So,
well, and
I think it's hard to have a conversation. I think conservatives could have a conversation with liberal because they want to make them less naive, or to share our perspective.
Well, and I will say too, I don't know if this is true, but I think that we're starting to see statistics that proves that it is true. If you've watched The Social Dilemma, he talks about since social media, there's a more and more of a divide of the left and the right on almost anything. So I think we're seeing more than the squeaky wheels. Like, I know on the right, there's people that just, they're on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter all day posting stuff, yet they'll never have a conversation with somebody. It's a safe space to go and dump I'm going to be this way from a conservative person. I'm trying to, see from a right wing conservative side, like how everybody sees, like, oh, these Donald Trump people are just hate everybody and they're racist, because there is that extreme, and there's probably more of those people. Just like on the left, there's more people that are willing to adopt socialist policies and everything else. But to come back to the point here is, we need to have these conversations, and I guess it would be safe to say to those conversations with people that don't agree, and try to understand why they think that, and maybe encourage them to think about, why do you think that? Like, I noticed in Target today that maybe 3 of the books on the bestsellers right now are like anti-racism books, and, white fragility, and a couple of other ones about, oh, you're racist if you're white and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's like, well, how do I feel about that as a white guy? We're just kind of screwed. If, no matter what you do, you're just always going to be this terrible thing and, a racist. So it's like, we need to define that and say, do we really believe that just because you're born a certain way that you are a certain thing? That's the same thing as saying, well, you were born of a certain color, descent, or whatever, so therefore it's the exact same thing. It's just opposite.
Which when I said last podcast about pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, If there is no truth, if there is no right and wrong, if there is no higher power, then there is nothing. There's nothing but power, and you divide into groups, and my group is gonna try to oppress your group, or like you're an oppressor, we got to overthrow you, and then we got to take power. If there's nothing, if there's no good in the world, all there is power. That is what you get there. It's become the new religion where the new morality is I'm woke. So, and then you're the sinner. You're the irredeemable sinner because of your skin color, and you can't do anything. It's like the worst is the worst religion there is. So I think if there is no God, if there is no meaning in life, we're filling that. We're trying to fill this God void, and I think on the left side of the spectrum, you're having this almost religious fervor over wokeness, where you're getting your virtue points on by tearing somebody down. And I think that's what's really causing a lot of problems.
Yeah,
it's why we're at each other's throats.
Yeah, I've got two thoughts. I'm a big fan of Ben Shapiro's, and he often points out that facts don't have feelings. And I tend to agree, but him saying that and me having that mentality goes completely against what I think Jordan Peterson's saying. So I'm going to sit here as an engineer and go, well, because of X, Y, and Z, that's why you're in poverty, or that's why you're oppressed. But I'm not taking the time to listen. Maybe there's more to that story. And I think that's the whole point is I might get a different perspective. It doesn't mean at the end of the day I have to agree, but maybe it'll make me appreciate what they're feeling a little bit more and maybe be a little bit less hard-nosed about it. Exactly.
Yeah. So in business, it's a very popular thing and has been for decades to do personality tests and find out, what is it going to be like to work with Rob or to work with Rick? Like, what kind of person are they? How are they going to react in meetings? Whatever. We do that in church groups with spouses, marital groups. We study each other's personalities. And one of them is the Enneagram test. And you kind of have these 9 personality tests. And it's like a 1 is more an analytical type personality. And then a 2 is more emotional. And then a 3 is more analytical. They sort of alternate. But we all have one and the other. Like, there's very few people that are only analytical and have zero emotion. But there are other people that are fully emotion, but they also have a little analytical. There's a balance. And one of the points in the Enneagram is that if you're a 4 or a 2, one of those numbers that tends to be high in emotion, when you're in a meeting or something and they say that emotional dominant person says something like, well, I feel like we should be doing X, Y, and Z. And you say, no, we're not going to do that. You're basically saying to someone who feels very strongly that, no, we're not going to do that because what you think and feel doesn't matter. So therefore you don't matter. So somebody who's predominantly an emotionally driven person, you're just saying you don't matter. I've been trying to look at this thing from a bigger perspective, because there's left and right. There's emotional and analytical. And yeah, there's some social stuff that we do in the United States. There's some capitalist ideas. It's a little bit of both. We have at least according to the numbers, we have almost a 50-50 split in the country. And I really think about that. Is it literally left brain, right brain? More than anything, we need to get along. We need to understand and try to maybe pull back to the middle, because understanding, like you said, Rob, like maybe I don't say, yep, you're right. I totally am going to flip over to the left, but let me try to understand where you're coming from and see if there's a way to do things more in the middle. I don't know if it's possible, but that's just my thought process.
I think a lot of the divisiveness we're seeing, you have to look at who's benefiting by driving this country and then fracturing it into this huge perception of left and right. So who's benefiting? Well, clearly, I would argue Joe Biden benefited from that. I would argue owners of big companies and mass and media have benefited. and they're the ones distributing all of this and allowing it to happen. So there's a lot of power and money to be made by creating division in the United States, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that now.
Yeah. I mean, with the coronavirus stuff, it's very obvious that the big tech companies and stuff, which I love them all, I think they're doing fantastic things, but they're totally winning, and the small businesses are getting destroyed. And I don't know how I feel about that. Not to get on a tangent about small business, but just as a tech guy, Amazon now allows you to go to Whole Foods and return your package. So I just bought something on Amazon the other day, and it was broken when it came. It didn't work as a piece of electronic gear. Didn't work. I literally, no box, nothing. I went into Whole Foods and laid it on the counter. They scanned my phone. Have a nice day. They package it. They deliver it. The thing cost $11. So they lost money surely on having people do all that work to get that little piece of equipment back. No small business can afford to do that with an $11 purchase. So I see that and I think, wow, that's great. Thank you, Amazon, for doing that. But at the same time, I hate it for the small business because they're getting destroyed with the shutdowns and stuff. So, I know that's a tangent, but I think going back to the chapter, I've found plenty of people that have differing opinions, and I think that it's complicated. And the only way to get to the bottom of complicated issues is to break them into pieces. And like with the lady in the rape case, and I think Jordan Peterson makes the point that he didn't get to continue working with her for whatever circumstance wouldn't allow it. But I think if he had, not to presume, but it would probably have to get to a point where you start breaking down the feelings and why are you doing that, and what are you lacking, and why are you going to these bars, and maybe there's a good reason, maybe there's not a good reason, maybe there's mixed, and then you break that down. We need to break down the issues, because when I've had people on the podcast or even just sitting on my porch or their porch and we disagree, I mean, I love these people. They're nice people. They have good families. They're your typical good citizen, and we just don't agree on certain things. So we'll start talking about it. And I feel like if you pick a specific issue, you can kind of maybe get to the bottom of it. But if you pick one just broad, like I'm right, you're wrong, you just never get anywhere.
Yeah. I think politics is boring. I think this topic I think this book was really good for, or this chapter was really good for, like, I had like work stuff, friend stuff, marital stuff. Like, this is so rich, and like politics it's fun, but it's like the least important thing for like our day-to-day lives.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. The political stuff. I mean, and maybe I should clarify, pretty much everything I just said, I think would be to encourage just a conversation, period.
Yeah.
About anything, definitely marriage or jobs, careers, stuff that's tough to figure out. We should be listening to somebody and say, oh, that's a good idea.
So I got a really good story.
Let's hear it.
About when I first started working. I had a friend who I went to school with. His name was Ed, and we sat next to each other in orthopedics class. He learned everything I learned, and it was I think I started working like 6 months or a year at a job, and then he said he was looking to move to Charlotte. So I'm like, hey, yeah, come on. I got him a job at my clinic, and so we had this I had this one patient, and I don't want to give up too much, HIPAA violation, too much information, but her name was like 50 letters long, and it was like. You had to use unicorn characters to like spell her name. It was just pixie dust and unicorns, and she was a little out there. So she had fibromyalgia, which I talked about another previous podcast, but there's definitely a mental component to it, like anxiety, depression, lack of sleep can manifest in like physical pain in different parts of the body. So she came in with that diagnosis, and so I was treating her. She had a lot of like neck, back pain, and I'd be like, okay. So basically I treat her like a spa. Like, he massage, relaxation, light stretches, and try to like get her to relax and help the body heal. And I got nowhere. And I think I went on my honeymoon or something like that, or I went on vacation, and my friend Ed treated her, and he started talking to her, and she was into like crystals and healing and chakra and aura, stuff like that. So my friend Ed said, "Oh, you know what? I was trained in this cranial sacral therapy. It's like where you're." So basically, there's a branch, crazy out there branch of physical therapy where they say that like your cerebral spinal fluid around your spinal cord, sometimes it gets kinked and you don't have the flow of energy to your body. So
Clearly, you think this is.
so he I think it's hokey. But
Have you actually listened to someone describe it?
yes. I've yeah. So he said, "Oh, let me work on your chakra." He didn't touch her. He didn't like do anything. He kind of waves his hand over her, and the next day she's like, "Oh yeah, I feel so much better. I'm like 80% better." And then I come back.
Wow.
So I come back and I'm right there and listen to him. And he said, "Hey," he said, "Oh, I kind of want to work with Ed." I'm like, okay, fine. I was kind of happy, like, Ed, you can take her. But then, so then he has her like doing like, he asked her like, "So what do you want to get back to doing? What do you enjoy?" And he had her like hula dance. She said she liked hula dancing. So he's having her hula dance in front of me, and he's like mocking me. He's never taken a cranial sacral therapy day in his life. He has no idea what he's talking about. Long story short, he listened to the patient. He knew that she was into that stuff. He gave her what she wanted. He knew that it was a disease of the mind. Well, there's definitely a mental component.
Yeah.
He sensed that, and yeah. So
He gave her what she needed.
yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't. I treated her by the book, what I thought what she needed. I thought what she needed, but he was better able at doing that. So he listened to her, and then I listened to him, but he did it tauntingly, kind of messed up.
And now you do the cranial therapy as well.
I learned sometimes you have to,
Yeah.
treat however the patient
Use
is
the
gonna,
placebo.
Yeah, use a placebo.
Well, and I think that goes back to what Rob was saying about Ben Shapiro. I remember when he first started saying your facts don't care about your feelings. Like I thought, yeah, that's awesome. But of course we, as just kind of conservative minded people, are going to think that. But people with feelings do not like that. It's like, my feelings do matter though. If I think that solution is going to fix my body, then it clearly helps, even if it's not medically provable, I guess.
But it hurt. It hurt like
Oh yeah.
my friend taunting me with her hula dancing.
So, any other notes on chapter 9, or shall we talk about chapter 10?
Friends, like it talked a lot about one-upmanship. Like when you're talking, having conversations, a lot of times, if you're insecure, douchebag, you'll like try to be like, "Oh, well, my story's way better than yours. You hear about this?" And you're not. So I think being able to, he said, to be able to riff off of each other, and that's why I like you guys, that we can make fun of each other and nobody takes offense. And
Absolutely.
So they say you want to pretend, do not actually put someone down when you pretend to put someone down, Jordan says. So you kind of make fun of them with a compliment. So,
Yeah.
my friend said I was more of a chick, and which I'm like the least emotional person, but anyways, but I said that he had the biggest boobs. So, but he has a big chest because he's like a bodybuilder. So I said that he had. So I was complimenting his pecs
And also making fun of him.
and also
same
making
time.
fun of him. So I don't know. It just cemented in my mind like how guys interact. And my wife kind of gets mad at me sometimes when I kind of say something a little provocative. What was the story about the one guy with the plane tickets? You were saying it, Rob, before.
Chad was saying it.
Oh, what was I think the one guy had cancer, or no?
Oh yeah, in the book he talks about the Marines and the I can't remember specifically, but it's like somebody in the guy's family passed away, and his comment was, "Oh, I just wasted money on plane tickets."
You think you got problems? I got non-refundable plane tickets.
Right.
When the guy's wife is dying or something.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a testament to. Jordan Peterson says that it's a testament to the deepness of their relationship that you can make a joke in a time like that, and it won't make the person fly off the handle. Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty rare. I've tried to evaluate like why certain people in my life I can have conversations with, and I feel more relaxed or more myself versus feeling like I have to front a little bit. Jokes aren't the same with certain people. Hobbies aren't the same. We're just different people, and sometimes we might not exactly get along. It doesn't mean we don't respect their opinion, but that's a tough one to figure out why, as humans, we're that way. I guess
I've had a long-standing rule that you should always leave your house a little bit messy when you have friends over, because if it's like crystal clean, then people are like, "Oh, they're on edge." You're trying to impress them. But if the house is a little messy, then you're comfortable. You don't want to be a pigsty, but people feel welcome. It's cozy, and it shows that you're actually friends instead of just, "Oh, I'm trying to really impress you."
Right.
So
I find that first impressions make a huge difference to me as to how I will approach someone in the future. So if they have a one-upmanship mentality or kind of a shutdown mentality, or I'm listening but I'm not listening, I no longer engage them in that level of conversation, which is why I find these podcasts talking with you two very easy, because I think right off the bat, we all had that mutual respect for each other's opinions. And maybe it's because we're all like-minded. It's probably a big part of it.
right.
But, even within like-minded folks, you can have people who are just so overbearing or so dismissive that you just don't want to carry on the conversation.
So I have a question about that. Have you guys ever encountered somebody? We've talked about like having conversations, and I think the whole point of the conversation is to push and pull and hopefully get somewhere with the conversation. It's not just, "Oh man, how about those Bills?" Which, good job on the Bills tonight, won by 30 points. Panthers are playing right now, and it seems like nobody cares. But those there's a conversation level that's deeper than just the latest and greatest sports. And I do know there's a lot of people in this world that's their comfort level is sports, golf, like things that are they're safe. It's not, well, if I say this, I might make this person uncomfortable. Because when you have a tough conversation about I mean, just pulling something out of the hat, but when somebody goes, "Man, my wife's a real jerk," or whatever, and you say, "Really? What's going on with that?" Rather than say, "Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that." It's, you start to have a conversation and say, "Well, what's wrong? Why do you think that?" And it should show a level of concern and care for the person. And then they say, "Well, this," and you don't understand, and that's a conversation to me. But the question is, has there been anybody in your life that has changed for the better, or maybe for the worse? So like you were saying, like if you meet somebody for the first time, you're like, "Oh, this guy's a one-upper," or whatever. And you just kind of, have you met anybody that has changed over time, or they approached you one way, and then it turns out, well, this guy's actually pretty cool, or maybe they changed into that. Do you guys know anybody that has changed? I guess is the big question.
I don't know if the person's changed, but my relationship with that person has changed. Just so we work together, and we were like the first day, it's like, oh man, this kid's really annoying. But we spent so much time together that I got to learn who he really was, and he got to know who the real me was. At which point we could engage in that level of conversation. But like, had we not had to show up to work next to each other for the next week, never would have talked to him again. Yeah.
When I think about that too, because as I've gotten older, there's been friendships and relationships that I've had that have waxed and waned, and some that have sustained. But there's people that in college they were my best friend and closest friend, and now like I just not that I don't care about them, but the conversation doesn't go anywhere, and their perspectives have changed on things, and the jokes have gotten old, and some of that. And in a way, I think I know it's sad to say, but it's hard for me to think of many people who have become more self-aware as a conversationalist to say, oh, let's try to intentionally have a good conversation. And I'm hoping, I think this thing I'm searching for is it possible for someone to change and to desire a deeper conversation?
I think I've changed. I think I was very socially awkward in high school, even in college, and I think it's taken a little time, and I've worked through a lot of stuff, and actually, even listening to these podcasts, I'm like, man, I was kind of like randomly off topic, and I'm like, that's a one-upmanship. I'm not engaging. I'm not listening to the other people, and we're not naturally riffing off of each other. So I think I used to be very, nervous about what I was going to say. I had a stuttering. It used to be a lot worse. So I used to be really nervous about speaking. So I don't know. I think I've gotten more comfortable as I've gotten older. So
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think about myself too, and I'm the only person that's lived through my life. So when I was in middle school and high school, I was a homeschool kid. I was afraid to answer the phone. I hated talking to people, going to the grocery store. But there was that, again, to point back to the Jordan Peterson, the challenge of, I'm going to go in the grocery store, and I don't want to, but I'm going to do it. And then physiologically, Jordan Peterson says that when you explore a new territory, that your brain is literally rewriting new circuits in your brain. You're becoming a new person. It sounds like that's what you were doing, and same for me. Because even doing this podcast, I mean, who would have thought the shy homeschool kid is like, I mean, it's tough for me to post videos on technology and to host a podcast and stuff. I enjoy it, but at the same time, I constantly reflect and think, man, what am I doing? This is not me. But it's a challenge, and I think it's a good challenge.
Yeah, and I think we all come up from a place of insecurity in our younger years. I mean,
sure.
Right, so we were both runners, not a lot of cool cross country and track runners.
They get all the girls.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But as you get older, your measure of success changes, right? So you're no longer have to worry about being, the jock with the cool car. You're measured by different levels of success. Are you a good father? Are you a good family person? Do you have good morals? Are you financially successful? All those measures change. So you can actually greatly improve your self-confidence and still be a nerd who plays video games all day.
Sure.
Right? Or runs half marathons, right?
But
but now accomplishing that's a much bigger deal. So I think people's confidence change over time, and like you said, their brains kind of rewire and become comfortable.
When I think that's the scenario is, I think that people do have the ability to change, and I hope that they do. There's a part inside of me, again, with the whole idea of overcoming averages, that somebody would say, I just want to do a little bit better in that thing, or start that business, or run that half marathon or full marathon or whatever it is. And don't be an average person, because if we can try to push our inner circle just a little bit better, and then maybe society just a little bit better, then it will impact the whole world. I mean, what's an IQ increase of 1% going to do? I mean, it would totally change the whole world if that was possible. So maybe it's not IQ change, but it's work ethic and conversations and trying to get to the bottom of how can we have a better functioning society that everybody enjoys living in. So chapter 10, be precise in your speech. It's essentially, it goes side by side with this one. I think I know I've said things that are wrong, and hopefully if I've said things that are wrong, I apologize for them. But definitely when I first read this book, 12 Rules for Life, this chapter stuck out to me really. Like, I thought, man, I say things a lot that I don't actually mean. Not that I'm intentionally saying bad things, but I'm just kind of vomiting out words instead of thinking about the appropriate word to say. And I'll give you a really stupid example that happened to me actually this week. So you guys know my mom's struggling with throat cancer right now, and she was tested positive for the coronavirus right after Thanksgiving, and it's just been a disaster. So I'm on edge and I'm stressed about everything. And one of my clients was gracious enough to give me this little square of fabric, and it had like a little cross and a Bible verse on it saying, stick this in your pocket, and every time you reach in your pocket and you touch that cloth, just remember there's people praying for you, and you maybe stop and say a word of prayer. Well, the word that I kept using when I described it to my mom was a prayer shawl. I called it a prayer shawl. And I I said that to my wife as well. I said, yeah, this client, gave me a prayer shawl. And, of course, my mom said, oh, that's so nice. Like, because when you go through chemotherapy and radiation, apparently you get cold. And so, she was thinking, I'll go into the room with the shawl on and I'll warm up. And meanwhile, it's like
a napkin.
It's smaller than a napkin. It's like a 2.5 by 2.5 square. And so I said to my wife yesterday, I said, yeah, Mom's coming by to get this prayer shawl. I'm going to go get it out of my car. And so I walk in, and she looked at me with the weirdest look. She goes, that's not a shawl. I was like, I mean, it's a square. It's a prayer square. I don't know. And so we had a big debate about the meaning. So of course I'm Googling, what's a shawl? And it's like, there's the Jewish shawl, and there are some that have like a matching pocket napkin. And I thought, well, is it a stretch to say it's the napkin that goes with the shawl?
Just keep thinking of Zoolander. Is this a shawl for ants?
So I just, when my mom pulled up yesterday, I brought it out, and she had literally the same reaction as my wife. As she looked at it like, where's the shawl? So this is a perfect example of me. Like,
It's going to keep her warm.
I should have made it clear. Like, it's a prayer square. It's a piece of a quilt, and it's a tiny piece of a quilt. But I think that's just a stupid example of how we can take one little word and it totally changes the meaning in people's minds of what you just said. In my mom's mind, wow, they made me a prayer shawl. This is great. And it's this little square. And I think going back to chapter 9 with the conversations, we need to listen to what other people's words are saying and take meaning in what they're saying, assuming that they also are saying what they actually mean. Because if they're saying what they mean and you're listening, and then you're saying what you actually mean, you're going to get somewhere in the conversation. And I think in the Jordan Peterson videos, there's just tons of examples of, college kids trying to call him out, and they'll say something like, yeah, okay. And he's like, no, not yeah, okay. You don't agree with that. So why are you saying yeah, okay, if you don't agree with, like, don't say words that you don't mean. So be precise in your speech. So what do you guys think? What did you take away from that chapter?
I have a story about another patient of mine.
Let's hear it.
So I got a referral, and the diagnosis said pancreatic cancer. And I'm like, oh man, this is like pancreatic cancer, is like one of the worst diseases. And so I was kind of dreading going in. I'm like, what am I going to do with this person? They're probably going to be dead in a couple months. It's a really fatal cancer. So I get in there and I start talking to the patient, and he said, oh, yeah, the tumor was completely enclosed in the duct, and the surgeon said that he thought he got it all. So I'm like, oh, that is so great. Like, oh, that's awesome. Usually pancreatic cancer is like really, really fatal, 6 months, and usually most people are dead. And so I'm like, that's so great that they got it all, that it was enclosed. So then I got a call from my boss, and then the wife of the patient said, like, you said my father or my husband was going to be dead in 6 months, and this is outrageous, and you really caused trauma. I'm like, what are you talking about? I said this was great, that they got it all, that he's not going to be dead. Like, this is a good. So I've learned, not only do you have to be precise in your speech, you have to be so precise that people can't even misinterpret what you say. So, I thought I was being precise in my speech, but maybe I wasn't, and it, caused chaos.
Yeah.
I think there's an important distinction here, though. You, sir, are a doctor. So when you're giving medical comments, and I agree with you, I don't know how that could be misinterpreted, but it was.
Yeah.
You're right. You have to be careful. But I think, that's at a professional doctoral level. I have to be very careful at my work, what I promise on, and what I can't say the building's going to settle 1 inch. And then I said, well, I really meant 1.25 inches. That can screw up a lot of structural connections. So I have to be pretty precise in that regard in a professional level.
Yeah.
But I do find on a non-professional level, I tend to avoid conflict generally, even with my spouse. And I will sugarcoat things. But I think by being more precise, not being a jerk, but just being precise, it would be a better conversation, right? Because people can walk away and be like, oh, he's really not that upset. I do the same thing with my subordinates at work. I will not be direct and say, you need to be better at X, Y, and Z. I'll be kind of wishy-washy about how I present it, unless I'm really upset about it. And I think that doesn't do anyone any benefit. I think you have to be precise in a professional level. And even more so, I need to be more so at with friends and family, just so there's no misconstrued perception of how I feel about something.
Well, and to go back to the medical thing, I think medical is an interesting one because, I mean, living through it right now with mom getting diagnosed the way she did, the first week was a total roller coaster because when you hear cancer, it can mean a lot of things. And then it's like, well, we got to do the scan and then we can't really know. And I lived through that with my mother-in-law as well, where you just are hanging on every word every doctor says. And you're just like, well, this guy said, whatever, fill in the blank. And it was good news or bad news. And it kind of just depends on which one you're more apt to fall into. If you're like, oh my gosh, they said there's 90% chance that we're going to live. That means 10% chance I'm going to die. It's like, well, he didn't actually say that. And then you go back and clarify what he really meant is you have a 90% survival rate, which means you're probably not going to die at all. It just might be in 5 years it's curable. Those things are specific. And medical's tough because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like especially these cancer doctors are trained to not give you information unless they know for sure.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. And I was so relieved that I'm like, oh, I could tell you the statistics. Like, the statistics is not 95% of people are going to die within a year. So I felt free to say that because the patient was in that case because it was fully encapsulated and they got it all and the problem solved. So I I felt more free to say, to share with these, thank God that it's going to work out, because it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird how people can interpret your speech.
Well, and I think, interpretation, there's not much we can do about that other than be precise. I recall a story when I was a guitar teacher, and I was teaching this poor kid for like a year and a half, and he was just a terrible, he didn't ever practice. He never, ever practiced. So he would come and play 30 minutes. Half of it he goofed off. So arguably 15 or 20 minutes a week, he would pick up his guitar. It was never tuned. And I mean, he just kept coming back. And so finally the mom said, "Hey, this kid wants to go to the talent show. Can we get him ready to?" And I'm like, he's been playing a year and he can't even play 2 chords. I mean, that's really bad. And so in a unusual circumstance, they gave this lady my cell phone number, and she called me at the house, and we were talking about preparing her son for this talent show. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I've been trying for a year to get him to play 2 chords. He can't play a song. There's no way. He'll be embarrassed. And so I said, "Do you think he wants to be in the talent show because he wants to be in front of people? Would he do anything else, or does he want to play guitar?" And she goes, "I don't know." So she goes, "Well, do you think he has a chance?" And I'm not joking. I made the analogy. I said, "Listen, I would love to play for the Hornets, but it's just not, it's not going to work out for me." And I'm not joking. She said, "So you think he's got a chance?" After it was almost like a joke. I thought, if she didn't, she literally said, "Okay, so you think there's a chance for him?" And I was like, "Okay, we'll talk to him." So the next time the kid came in, I said to him, "You want to be in the talent show?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I want to be in the talent show." And I said, "Do you want to play guitar in the talent show, or do you just want to be in the talent show?" He goes, "Yeah, I just want to be in the show." And I said, "What if you told a joke? What if you were like a comedian and you'd stand up jokes?" And he goes, "Yeah, that'd be great." And they dropped out a guitar. And that's what he should have done a year ago. But anyway, I thought, wow, the interpretation, I could not have made it more clear. Like, I'd said, "I'd like to play for the Hornets, but I don't think it's going to happen." And her response is, "So you think there's a chance?"
She wasn't listening.
She wasn't listening. She was hearing what she wanted to hear. Like,
she needs chapter 9 first.
And maybe that's what she thought. Okay, so there is a small chance. Muggsy Bogues played for the Hornets. Maybe you could too. And I'm like, no, you clearly have never seen me shoot a basketball.
There is a nice little trick that I've learned about being precise, if it ever comes to this. So, you guys familiar with the compliment sandwich?
Yes.
Yes, but do tell.
Okay.
Remind me.
So, compliment sandwich would be, all right, employee or friend or whatever, I have something important I'm going to have to tell you, and you're probably not going to like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead this conversation with a compliment. Then I'm going to tell you what I really intended to tell you. It's going to be precise and blunt. And then I am going to end that conversation with another compliment. But the meat and potatoes of that conversation is the bluntness in the middle.
Does that work?
Surprisingly well, until people figure out you do it too often. I'm not saying I do it too often, but usually there are certain people that I work with. If I'm getting a compliment that seems out of place, I don't want to hear the next sentence.
Right. Yeah. Now that you've said it publicly on the podcast, they're on to you.
Yeah. Chad, you have a really great beard. Your podcast could use a little work, and you're a great guy.
There you go.
It's like the episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm with this when Seinfeld comes on and he says, "If anybody ever says, 'That being said,' they're getting ready to say something bad." So yeah, I do have to say, like, I mentioned this on a podcast the other day with a fellow networking entrepreneur. Some stuff just seems so rehearsed. In the networking world, I've just been seeing a constant, like, you guys just finished the Gary Vaynerchuk book, didn't you? Like, it's like they're quoting it.
Yeah.
And they sit on a Zoom call, which is already boring as it is, and they're like, "We're going to create content, and we're going to, post Google ads." And you're like, man, so I couldn't make it more boring. because it just is like there's no passion behind it. There's no real life behind it. So when you feel that rehearsed, like, oh great, here comes my boss with the sandwich again. Like I could see that it takes a little bit of the humanity out. But on the same token, though, my insurance agent, I know that guy has a spreadsheet, and when he sees my number pop up, he pulls my name up. I know he has to, because he's like, Chad, how is how's Kim and the
you had a baby
dance recital 2 years ago? No, he does a lot better job at that. But oddly enough, I don't even care. It's great. It's like, oh, at least he keeps a spreadsheet. Like at least he does that. Yeah. So I think it's nice. Yeah, but yeah. So what do you think, Rick? You got another story? Be precise in your speech.
So I think the chapter really talked about relationships with your spouse, and saying what you need, and yeah. So if you don't get what you want, or your needs are being met, resentment builds, or there's boredom, or the thing my wife says is like, do better. You need to do better. And she'll be pretty vague. And I'm like, I need more. Like, I'm here. I'm doing this. And it's like, do better doesn't work. So then she said, okay, I need help with the dishes and making the kids clean up. And, it really annoys me when you leave your shoes out. Yeah. So, okay. Then I'm like, okay, I got those. Boom, boom, boom. And then I can work on that, So I think that's helped when she was more precise, instead of like, the house is a mess. I'm like,
And I think that's a guy and girl thing, because another one that I kind of pulled out of, it was actually in chapter 9, is when he talks about when a woman is wanting to talk about something, they don't always necessarily want the person to come in and fix it. And I think guys tend to have, they're presenting a problem, therefore I'll fix it. But he goes further to say the whole point is, if you're not listening to your wife, sometimes the problem needs to be discussed so that they can figure out what the actual problem is. And I'm guilty of that as well, where my wife will be venting about something, and she's not even asking me to fix it yet. She's just trying to work it out in her head. Like, what is the actual problem? Is that Chad's not doing enough laundry, or that, what is the specific thing? And sometimes she's not asking to fix it. A lot of times she's not asking for me to fix it, which is unfortunate, because that's the way I'm wired.
I think with my wife, we have that same dynamic, but then I think Jordan said, if you ask a question to fully understand what's going on,
yes,
they want that. I think my wife, if I ask a question, she thinks that I didn't listen, or I wasn't listening, or like she has some I treat her back, her pelvis, physical therapy. Yeah. So I'd ask her a question, like my brain's thinking one thing, and she may have said something, and I was, okay, my train of thought was A, B, C, but her answer to question A also meant to C, but I wasn't thinking about C yet. I was still thinking about A and then B. So she gets offended when I ask a question, because she feels like I'm not listening to her. But my brain wasn't working that way. I was trying to fully understand the problem. Or you may have said something 3 months ago, but I want to start fresh and really, really think about this thing anew. So, honey, when you listen to this, it's not that I don't listen.
Our wives don't listen to this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Just our moms.
It's a debate over do they want the facts, or do they want emotional support? And that goes back to the ideograms. We talked about ideograms.
Enneagram.
But I can recall a conversation. So my wife was talking to her sister, and they're very close. And for whatever reason, the topic came up on abortion. And they don't see eye to eye on that. And it got to the point where my wife actually hung up on her sister, which is something that does not happen. She was so mad. And she told me about it. And instead of listening and trying to have a emotional support type conversation, I started digging into the abortion topic. And she started to get equally as mad at me. And I kind of shut it down pretty quick. And I did go back and apologize later. But again, she didn't want to talk to me about abortion. She wanted to talk to me about how pissed off she was at her sister and just wanted someone to listen. So I think if I had asked the right questions and actually listened, she wouldn't have got upset with me.
Well, and I think Jordan Peterson's advice is great that, like you were saying, Rick, is just ask questions to make sure you understand. And I think he even says, like, again, going back to the theme here of conversation, is if you're having a real conversation and you can reiterate what the person just said better than they did, that means you really understand them. So it is delicate because, again, in our stage of life, it's tough because you don't have a meaningful conversation. This is while there's kids in the back screaming and you're loading the dishwasher, that you're trying to interpret what your wife is really meaning, or what you're trying to say to her about how you feel about something. It's that's the complicated part, at least for our stage of life. But yeah, the at least the attempt of. So let me clarify, because like Rob, you said before we started, like, if you've got a cell phone in your hand, forget it. You might be, yeah, go ahead and tell me what we're doing Thursday night, and you look at your cell phone, and it's just, you might as well have just walked outside and slammed the door on your wife. It's just and that's the way we're designed. So clarifying questions, I think, is good. Rick, you're probably just asking the wrong way.
Yeah.
You're just.
Well, there definitely is times when my wife's telling me about a friend of a friend who I don't know and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, if I don't know who these people are, I don't really care about the story.
There's a course that we take at where I work called professional sales training. And you probably can relate this to picking up new clients, as maybe you can as well, Rick. But when you go meet a prospective client, you probably go in thinking primarily they're looking for low cost, at least in a lot of cases, low cost. And that might be how they come across. But if you actually spend the time to sit down and probe and ask questions, what you'll find is maybe it has nothing to do with cost. Maybe it has to do with service time, or frequency of visits, or can I meet their construction schedule? But if you don't ask questions and probe them and listen simultaneously, their failure to be precise is going to lead to no work relationship.
Yeah. And those conversations from a business perspective, again, are complicated. There's cost, there's time. I know for me, when it comes to IT, some people see the IT guy in the building and they think, what's broken? So their perspective is, if Chad's here, if his team's here, something is broken and I don't want it to be that way. So they're frustrated if they see one of us. And other people feel like, hey, we want somebody here every once in a while to come in and look over our shoulder. It's a different perspective. So when we're onboarding a new client or kind of having that first conversation, we literally just had it last week with a potential new client. It's, now look, do you want us here all the time or do you not? What does that feel like to you? And it depends on the business owner. But you have to kind of push and pull on that, because if you're not clear, it gets confusing. And I know from a business perspective, I don't ever want to overpromise or say something that I can't do, so I have to be very clear of, now, when you're wanting us to zip up here on Sunday afternoon, like, you do realize that's going to be an extra charge sort of thing. Like, we have to clarify that. So yeah, I mean, clarification in speech and business is so important. And I guess you could arguably say it's even more important in the family. Saying stuff to our kids and our wives we need to be clear what we mean.
So, Chad, what do you want to tell Kim right now that you're afraid to do, but you should be precise in your speech of how your needs aren't being met? Just kidding.
Go use the restroom.
Just kidding. Rob, your turn.
And with that, no, yeah. If anybody's still listening, Yeah.
Maybe we should have those conversations in private.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the overall theme here is so awesome to just have good conversations, and this is always good for me, even if no one ever listened to this episode. For me to have these conversations with you guys is good for me. Hopefully, someone will listen to it and be encouraged to have a conversation. And again, with the podcast, if there's anybody listening that knows, or if you guys know anybody who would be a good guest, or somebody that maybe has a differing opinion or wants to come on and share a different perspective, I think it's good. It's good to be around like-minded people and listen to their perspectives. It's also good to be around people that.
We got a new book coming up.
Yeah, that's right.
12 more.
12 more rules. And what's the subtitle of the book?
I'm not sure.
It's
I don't know either.
Beyond Order is the new book. So just again, since this podcast is revolving around Jordan Peterson, so March 3rd, 2021, 12 more rules, Beyond Order is going to be released. You can pre-order it now. I'll try to grab the link and throw it in the bios and everything else for this episode, but I'm excited. Just hearing some of the snippets, and I know he personally has been through a lot. He had the coronavirus. He had a benzodiazepine addiction that he overcame. So, man. But I think in the world that we're living in, we need a guy, like Jordan Peterson and others to just have some fresh views on the world. And I'm particularly excited because I've seen these rules before. I've been a fan of his for a long time, and they have to do with, I think, the idea, and we'll hopefully read it soon in a couple months, but it's like going beyond just getting your life in order, but like looking at things like beauty, and we talked about that too. So maybe we'll do some podcast episodes on that book when it comes out in March. So awesome. Well, guys, thanks for coming on. Got the cards made up with the QR code for everything, so you guys pass it out to your friends, and share. I've noticed it's no secret that when stuff gets liked and shared, and more people see it. Hopefully, more people are encouraged. More people will come on, and we can impact more people. So, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.